Hello everyone, this is Soviet Bear and welcome to Soviet Bear Show. Today is my guest Joaquin Flores, and right now our subject is social justice and social justice warriors in the Western countries. So why am I interested in this subject as a Russian person who doesn't live in the West, in the Western countries? But I am interested because of the Pussy Riot, of the female incidents, and because of the our, as many people say, controversial law banning homosexual propaganda to minors, and our, the Sochi Olympics and the Western media campaign against it under the guise of defending gay rights, even though I can say that gays are really oppressed in Russia. So Joaquin, just let me tell you what I see, as what I heard and what I read and what I watched on YouTube about the Western social justice warriors is that they, if you are white, straight, cisgender male, you are the enemy, you are the scum, you need to be, killed or exterminated because the black lesbian women are the most oppressed, and you need to defend them. Just they are oppressed, you are the oppressor if you are white, straight, cisgender male. Is that correct or not?
Sort of. I mean, it's sort of correct. I mean, I don't want to like contribute to polarizing the subject. I don't. I mean, it's you know, like generally, like black people don't give a fuck about this issue at all. So what? And most women don't give a fuck about this issue at all. And most men don't give a fuck about the issue at all. So it's actually what it is actually it's upper middle class college educated white men primarily pushing this actually, and they've got some deep rooted psychological issues either interpersonally and as the result of propaganda, social engineering. But make no mistake about this, that while the very same people who are said to be the so-called enemy in this social justice warrior context are in fact the people leading it. Okay, so this is
Yeah.
not, so in other words, like uh, African American women of color lesbians are not leading this, and actually don't even have a big interest in this, because social justice warrioring is almost exclusively an upper middle class or college educated Anglo-Saxon phenomenon. Okay, so that's the first thing to understand about it. So
Yeah.
when cisgendered white males are on the receiving end of these attacks, like what I really hope they don't do is look at African American females as the problem, even though African American or Asian or Latin or whatever, or lesbians or transgender people are being held up as the noble savages or whatever, that they're the subject of the charity, and they're the noble cause. They're not they're not the ones leading this thing, and they don't really even support it that much in the United States. Okay, being from arguably the largest metropolitan area in the United States, Los Angeles. I was there because I'm almost 40 years old, right? In the early 90s, I was already a teenager, okay? And I was there. I grew up really close to West Hollywood, which is like the gay part of LA, even though there's like gays everywhere. And let me tell you something. First of all, there was never homophobia, really, not institutionally. And secondly, all the issues about the gay thing that were education related and acceptance related or overcoming homophobia type stuff, that was already resolved, like, dude, like 20 years ago. So, all right, and this is going to figure into like what I'm going to say, because I think this is the part that's not really talked about. So we understand, first of all, that the social justice warrior thing is not even coming from the people who are supposedly the light. Okay. Now, in the United States, you have this really stupid, fucked up phenomenon called representative politics. So yeah, there is maybe like one or two really popular African American female lesbians on Twitter, who are promoted by, Anglo-Judeo, white middle class, college educated, media savvy people. And then what they say is supposed to be like they're speaking for everybody. So you have, first of all, like representation fallacy, that just because like, for example, like I happen to be Latin, whatever, from the United States, but I don't speak for all Latinos, right? That's the thing first, right? You see what I'm saying? But when they do the social justice warrior thing, it's like one person is speaking for everybody. But like I said, if you're actually from cities, right, and you actually know people and work with people and had friends and people you went to school with from across the whole spectrum of like race and class, gender and sexual preference and shit like that, like that these issues are not important. That's the first thing I want to, that's okay. So I've made that point.
Yeah.
The second issue really, dude, is that these issues were resolved already. Oh my God, dude. Like, I mean, you can see that the issues are non-issues because you have really positive representations of gay people and people of color in television and film going back to the 90s, maybe the 80s with black people. There were a lot of negative representations of black people in film, and there still will continue to be, but they might not be because of their blackness, but it could be because they're telling a story about gangs or telling a story about crime or something. And there is a debate about, to the extent, is art imitating life or life imitating art, but at any rate, at the present time and for the last number of decades, I mean, inner city crime is, because urban centers are primarily populated by minorities, and because there is a high crime rate. If you make a film about it, it would be inaccurate to like show that it, like Compton or South Central or is all white people, because it's really not. In fact, there's almost no white people there. And so, you could say it's a negative representation and stuff like that, but it's an accurate representation. But you will also see in these films, it's actually, they can be very compelling films, and you'll have this, and the protagonist will also be African American in these communities that don't want to see the violence and who have a better vision are also African American, right? They're also black people. So I think a lot of the stories are accurate. There may not be good films because films are not always good or whatever, and they're commercial or whatever. So it is what it is, right? There were a lot of bad stereotypes about people of color in films in the 60s and 70s, and you had like blaxploitation films, Superfly and all these films like that. I mean, they're pretty funny movies, If you know what you're watching, you can watch it. But
All right. So, a lot of those social justice warriors say, check your privilege, check your white privilege, check your male privilege. So, what are these privileges? Are they real? Do they really exist? Do white straight people really have those privileges?
you know
What?
what? Again, yeah. Well, yeah, they do. In some ways, they do. In some contexts, white people. I would not say straight people necessarily in all the same contexts,
And
but yeah, white people.
males.
Males, maybe not. No, I mean, look, privilege for what? What are they talking about? So everyone has certain privileges, and some of them are related to your gender, your race, your class. Others are related to your intelligence. Some things are height. Are you tall? Are you short? Are you fat? Are you skinny? I mean, everyone's different, and it's going to privilege you in different situations. If you're dating, maybe the girl likes big guys, maybe she likes small guys, maybe she likes, whatever. I mean, privilege and what? That's the problem. Is, first of all, they define privilege purely in terms of economic, political, social power, and they define it purely in the way that the dominant paradigm defines it. And it's almost like Asperger's syndrome, or it's almost like blindness, because because life is much more complicated than political power, like in terms of like what Congress or the Senate. I mean, it's such a strange way of looking at life. It's a very narrow view of privilege. In hiring situations, in fact, women tend to do better in hiring situations for most jobs that are appealing to women, and you know, it's discrimination is actually against the law, and it's fairly, most of the public agencies are fairly open to you able to file a case, and a lot of employers will settle even if you don't have a case. The cost of sending a lawyer, and like say in California, you've got the National Labor Relations Board, and you file a unfair labor practice suit or something. I mean, you know, employers don't want to deal with this. There's so much case law behind this. I mean, if you're a woman and you've got qualifications, they're going to hire you, and it's not because they're even afraid. I mean, there's just so much. There's so many published views. There's so many magazines in America that say that women, in fact, are better employees, and that they're, you know, multitaskers, and they're better communicators and all this. So it's actually, you know, an employment privilege. In fact, in cities in the United States, women earn on average, I think women under 35 earn on average 8% more than men. Unemployment for women is lower than it is for men. So that's, I mean, you know, that's, you know, but people are privileged differently, but it would be a lie to say that people don't have different privileges. I mean, you could break it down to individuals, you know, but it's not a bad thing to be privileged. I mean, you can't unprivilege yourself, and checking your privilege, you know, I think it gets used to like hit people over the head. I mean, is it good to like realize that the person next to you may not understand what you're saying because they're stupid, and that you're privileged, like something that might be easy to you is not easy to them? Yeah, I guess that's good to understand that, but we just had a technical failing.
Okay.
Are we still here? Okay.
Yeah, we're still here. Okay.
So, but I mean, the thing is that it's used to bludgeon people over the head. I mean, the thing is that in the context of social space, privilege is relative. That's what I'm saying. It's not an absolute thing. So in situations, people are privileged differently, and it you know, if you're trying to get into medical school, yeah, then smart people are privileged over stupid people. If you're trying to get into porn, then people with like big dicks are privileged over people with small dicks. If you're, you know what I'm saying? But if you're trying to get hired as like an intern somewhere, actually being stupid might be a privilege, because they don't want someone who's, you know, smarter than they think they are or whatever. So, you know, being ambitious might be a privilege, but it might not be a privilege if people can read it on you and they want to hire you into a lower position and keep you there. You know, being tall is definitely a privilege, but if you want, I don't know, be like a jockey or something and race horses, then it's not. Like being small is a privilege in that situation. So in absolute terms, is there privilege? Yeah, but it's mostly class privilege, and there is some race privilege, but it's like, so what, in a way, because society is so big and complex. Like, look, yeah, if you're growing up in a very like wealthy suburb of Chicago in the 1970s, and all the like white boys have like square chins and blonde hair, and you know, all the girls are wearing polo shirts and sweaters tied around the thing, and they're going to the country club, and you happen to be the black guy whose dad happened to be a black doctor or whatever, yeah, probably you're not going to get invited, you know, to the parties and stuff like that, and it's going to be much harder to get hired. So that's real privilege. But then culture changed a lot in the 80s and 90s, and it became really cool to have like a token black friend. So, and it actually like proved that you're not kind of like racist. So even like preppy kids would have like token black friends and stuff like that. I mean, but in terms of being in the situations where they're invited to the, you know, parties and to the country club, and if they could get an internship, or if it can help them network, you know, or get a job, so that would help them, you know. But yeah, look, the thing is that while racism does exist, and while classism does exist, and while there is privilege, the point is that hitting people over the head with it doesn't help. And actually, there's probably nothing you can do about it because human beings inherently are tribalistic and the genders are inherently different, and people generally like to be around people who are like themselves, and they want to hire people that they can trust, and people trust themselves, right? So then they trust people who look like them, resemble them, come from the same class, race, and so forth. I would actually say that gender is the least important issue in terms of privilege. In fact, in many ways, in objective terms, women are probably more privileged in Western countries, in
Well, no
employment.
shit. The women probably, the Western women, I mean the North American and the Western European women, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I think that the Western women, the North American and the Western European, they are probably the most privileged and the most liberated women on the planet, you know, because, you know, in Western countries, just if a woman wants to ruin your reputation, you know, and you had I hear that you had consensual sex with a woman, and if she next day decides to cry rape, then the man's life is ruined. And if they had drunken sex,
Right,
the woman
right.
can
Okay, yeah. So this is like, so this is, so, okay. So this
and
is like
not to
another level of the
and not
subject.
to mention
So,
that the courts are in the Western countries are absolutely biased towards women when it comes to, you know, the child support, and you know, a man can see,
yeah, that's called family law,
yeah,
right? Yeah,
family.
that's definitely, courts are stacked in favor of women, and, you know, but the thing is that that's not a new thing, okay? That's actually, so I think the main thing to, so in Social Justice Warrior, you've got kind of like an anti-racism crusade, you've got the transgender, transsexual, queer thing and the gay thing, and so it's all there. Then you've got the feminism. Now, the thing is that probably gay people have been, you know, historically persecuted or repressed in some way, um, and but that doesn't mean I think that there's solutions. I'm just saying that by how the word is defined, if we can agree on a definition, probably gay people have been. You know, the United States definitely is a class society like England, and it's definitely a lot of race. It's not a national society, it's not a people's society, and it's definitely an individualistic society with a lot of racism. But you know what? Um, you get a job, you get paid more money, whatever. I mean, are you a happier person? I mean, that's, you know, there's just so many complex philosophical questions, you know. I mean, um, there's a lot of opportunities in life if you make them, if you find them. I don't have a problem with people who are petty criminals or, you know, whatever, and people, you know, what's the word? Victimless crimes. I don't have really problems with people who are pimps or drug dealers or whatever like that. And the truth is that you take a gamble, and life's a gamble, and you might get pinched and go to prison, and sentences are worse for black people and stuff like that. But you know, there's a lot of ways to come up in the world, and you know, you can definitely go to schools that aren't as expensive or not as good, but you can. But if you're obsessed with learning, you know, you can get a good education, you can be self-taught, you can get a degree, and if you network, go to parties, meet the right people and stuff like that, you can get a job. But the thing is this idea that if it wasn't for privilege, that everyone was going to be rich or everyone was going to be the CEO or everyone, I mean, you know, it's like you're going to have chiefs and you're going to have Indians in a society, and unless you're talking about some like future gift society without classes and stuff like that, I mean, that's kind of like science fiction or social fiction. There's never been a society that's been a classless society, people without privilege. So in every society, there's going to be ways to regulate privilege. And you know what? They're not fair no matter what, but life is not fair. And you're on the receiving end of it. It really sucks. I mean, what I think that if classism and racism lead to people being incarcerated unfairly and or really impoverished where they're actually starving and can't feed their children that they reasonably thought that they could feed at the time that they had children, okay? That they were not irresponsible in having children, and other things happened later and they couldn't, you know, I I am a human being, and I do have sympathy for that, and I do think that has to be addressed. America has extreme polarization of wealth and poverty, and there's really not a middle class. So I would want to get that point across, but I also think that the social justice warrior thing is completely, bullshit, really, because what it is there's in psychology, it's like people are trying to make themselves feel better, and they're sending all these abstract symbolic symbols about goodness. Like, I'm a good person because, I'm going to tell you that you need to check your privilege, or that, I'm going to remind you about racism. And the thing also to keep in mind is that almost universally, all these people are under 30 years old. And for those of us who have been around the block a few times and have been involved in social movements, and know what social justice or justice is, they were like born yesterday, and they're acting like none of us have heard this stuff before. So to kind of like get into some of the real history of it is that you have this theory, you have basically, so you had this in Italy, right, in the 1920s. Is this going to be boring for people, or is this part of the story? I mean, I could explain it if you want. Okay, so in Italy in the 1920s, okay, so in Russia in 1917 there was a revolution.
Yes.
Okay. So, and that ushered in a lot of changes and in that society. Some of them were inevitable, and others needed a kickstart to happen. So this was connected already to pre-existing like Europe-wide movement, and it had some roots in Latin America. And are we still here?
Yes.
So so in Italy, there was also a communist party, right? Yes. And one of the theorists was Antonio Gramsci. And in Italy, between I think 1918 and 1920, or 1919, 1921, was called the Two Red Years, and there was a lot of peasants and workers that were shutting down factories and going on strike, and there was really a possibility of a contest for the trade unions and the left-wing political parties to take power, like as this kind of like how they did in Russia, but it didn't happen, and so. And I might be wrong by 4 or 5 years about the Two Red Years, because I haven't looked at the history in a long time. This used to be like one of my favorite subjects. So what happened is that Gramsci was looking at the question of why did even though the objective conditions for a revolution against the system existed, why did people not take state power? And so he began to look at other questions like mass psychology, so to speak, propaganda, and he called all of these institutions in society hegemonic institutions. So it wasn't just like you had the ruling class, like the oligarchs. So this was, so to kind of, for people who aren't, I don't know, cued in, so they were trying to make an anti-oligarchic revolution or an anti-capitalist revolution. But I don't want to confuse libertarian viewers about capitalism, not some fictional capitalism that has never existed. I'm not addressing the Trotskyists of capitalism who think that, no, okay, I'm talking about what people would call capitalism, a society that called itself capitalist, not some, whatever, so fictional hypothetical scenario. So, so they were trying to make a revolution, and it didn't happen. So they began to look at, okay, well, you've got these institutions. You've got the church, you've got the newspapers, you've got all these things that kind of make people believe in the society, even though they don't have a stake in the society. So in other words, people have a consciousness which is kind of against their objective social economic interest. They believe in something that's a lie. Lenin probably originated this view within the communist movement. He called it false consciousness. Gramsci said that he looked at it from a different angle, and I won't complicate it, but he called it hegemony. Yes. So now actually his ideas were pretty accurate in many ways, because media is important and socialization, the things that you get told as a 5-year-old are going to influence, what you think. So it's not just as simple as like, well, you go organize the workers into unions, and then you raise minimum slogans and maximum slogans, and then these demands increase, and you organize more workers, and you make an alliance with the peasants, and then you take state power. So that was like just the typical formula that the communists had, and it didn't work out in Western Europe, and so they began to explore social theory in a different way. Then in Germany, you had the Frankfurt School, and they also began to look at this, and they also looked at Nazism, and then a lot of the Nazi type of theories of organizing and social power were then included into this analysis, and on paper they were, anti and anti-Nazi, but in fact, in theory, what they were doing is they were refining the best things out of communist theory and Nazi theory in relation to social organization psychology. So you have Adorno, you've got the Frankfurt School, the whole Walter Benjamin. You've got a whole school of them. The one who stayed behind was Heidegger, and he actually joined the Nazis, and he didn't go to America with the other Frankfurters, but he still maintained his relationship with Marcuse. And Marcuse wrote One-Dimensional Man, and they're looking at these other ways that power and relations of power. So this is a Marxist concept, but it's also broadly sociological, because you're talking about power and relations of power. And so as the shit basically mutated, and as it was brought into the United States, it was this whole process of social engineering. Basically, if the voice of society was going to be conservative, and it was going to maintain power, then the radical elements were going to have a radical phraseology, and they're going to have radical arguments that appeal to people's sense of freedom, and this would have a destabilizing effect on society. I'm now going to connect this to Pussy Riot, social justice warriors, and all that.
The
okay.
female.
So, what?
The female.
Yes, Femin and Pussy Riot,
yeah,
and all of this. So it was discovered that if the voice of society was the revolution, then you took the voice away from the real revolutionaries. This may or may not have been true about the Soviet Union, but at least there was a somewhat Gramscian and Trotskyist criticism of the Soviet Union, or you had in Orwell's 1984, right, that is the society itself that's saying we are the revolution. They're like an institutional revolutionary governing party, and then so it's very difficult for actual revolutionaries to raise their slogans because the society that's in control is the one raising those slogans. So very, very strange. It's like an advanced level of social rule. The American Revolution was kind of like this too, right? Because it's a revolution, and the Constitution is revolutionary, but that's the government. And I don't want to get comments or confusion about people about the limitations of government in the Constitution. It still is a legitimizing ideology. It's still a constitution that legitimizes the state, that legitimizes the government. And that was the whole debate between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. And so jumping ahead in the United States, there was already that understanding about the demagoguery of where you can be in power and raise the criticisms against that establishment. And that's the whole technique or the whole tactic of liberal Western societies, is that they are, by criticizing themselves, they take away the voice of real criticism, and then they take that criticism of themselves and they project it onto other countries and they weaponize it. So first it's used to control the class situation in the country, and then it's used and weaponized, and other countries are attacked with the same stuff. So it's so the idea of gender, I mean, you could get into like the Tavistock Institute and their studies, and the Beatles and the LSD and the social revolution in the 1960s, and you can get into that. But you know what really happened was later. Then you've got from was it MIT and Harvard. You had Gene Sharp, and they kind of are some of the most important people that came up with the color revolution thing and creating NGOs in foreign countries that they want to destabilize. It worked in Serbia, where I am. It worked in a lot of countries. You had the Arab Spring and all this stuff. And so Femin and Pussy Riot are basically intelligence operations that are connected to this theory about creating and taking the leadership role of social criticism.
Yeah, please, can you tell me, please, what all this social justice warrior thing has to do with Marxism and cultural Marxism and the left, movement? Because, I see a hashtag on Twitter, resist capitalism, a hashtag on Twitter posted through the products of capitalism like iPhone, and on the website Twitter, which is also product from of the capital. Isn't this ridiculous and inconsistent and incoherent? Those people who hashtagging resist capitalism just so ignorant about what the socialist revolutionary movement is.
Oh, well, they are ignorant about socialist revolutionary movements. That's true. I don't agree that it's hypocritical or inconsistent to use technology created in a society. It's actually not a contradiction of Marxist theory at all. In fact, Marxist theory says that that it's the things developed by capitalism that are socialized and used in a socialist society, in fact. So that's not a contradiction in Marxist theory, actually, but the thing is that the social justice warriors are not Marxists. So that's one thing. And so the thing is that there is a lot of false polarization on this issue of social justice warriors. And now there is one basic book in the Orthodox Marxist canon, written by Frederick Engels, and it's called The History of Family, Private Property, and the State. And it does basically focus on the origin of classes and of gender privilege, so to speak, but he didn't use the word privilege. And it is connected, they do connect it to private property. I think it's a highly problematic work. I think it's probably mostly in error. Engels otherwise was quite brilliant and had a lot of good contributions, scholarly and so forth. But this was based mostly on very outdated 19th century sociology or anthropological research of a guy named Morgan. And radical feminism, so there's many radical feminisms. So now you're jumping to the United States in the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s. So you've got second wave feminism and third wave feminism is really what you're talking about, like the early 70s and then the late 80s. So you're talking about these two waves of feminism. First wave of feminism didn't call itself first wave, and that's really talking about really old stuff. But in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and 90s really laid the foundation. And so in universities across the country, they opened up what are called women's studies departments, and where but the idea that feminism is Marxist, well, some radical Marxists would agree with that, but others would not. And most feminists would say, no, we're like not Marxists and we're anti-Marxist, and they're not like being cynical or tricky or something like that, and they really are not Marxists, and they don't. They may not be aware that a lot of the some of the concepts are vulgarizations or perversions of Marxist theory. Marxist theory has many problems, but it's also possible to be wrong about what Marxist theory says, right? So that's two different. So I'm not saying that Marxist theory is correct or incorrect, right? I'm just saying that most of them are not Marxists in any sense, and others that are connecting it. But there's also anarchist feminism, and you know, this is a big problem in the left in the United States because they're very weak on theory, and the anarchists are probably the weakest on theory, and most anarchist theory is rooted in the most coherent or consistent anarchist theory is rooted in Marxist theory, and anarchist theory on the woman question or women's liberation is mostly rooted in Marxist theory. And they may not be aware of it, and there's a lot of bad scholarship and a lot of people, you know, you can like criticize what you think is Marxism using actual Marxist theory. So that's the whole, I don't want to like overcomplicate it and shit for people, but that's the basic fucking thing of it. Yeah. But in the radical feminism, so you've got a lot of mainstream feminism, and feminism is also an inherent part of human nature. And that's, I think, what's most important to understand is that like all men are basically feminists and all women are basically feminists, because in a society, like the men are just expendable. And that's not a value judgment, bro. It actually, we are, because we can all fucking die, but if one man survives, he can repopulate the planet with all the women, okay? Because, you know, every time that you know, handle business by yourself, you're like saying goodbye to like 10 or 50,000 children. But, you know, women are only born with, I don't know, 500, 600, 700 eggs or whatever it is in their life. And they have every 4 weeks, 13 times a year, they drop an egg, and you multiply that over the number of years that they're going to drop eggs. And that's how many eggs they have and no more. And they can only have one baby every year about. Okay.
Yeah, and now some people say that women can actually reproduce without men, and other people believe this shit. Oh, Jesus Christ.
No, there's a lot of ignorance being promoted on that. I mean, there's just so much stupidity.
Christ. I mean, how can people believe that women can reproduce without men? Oh, it baffles. It just boggles my mind.
You know what? Don't worry about it. Let me tell you that there's always going to be stupid people. The internet is full of people who are wrong. You just can't fucking think about it. But I will tell you that. But yeah, so you had, the real story is yet to really be told here, because what really happened is that, in fact, this stuff was kind of marginal and it wasn't that important. But really, it was Obama, right, intentionally, not him personally, but his handlers, and the whole concept of Obama was really a big part of pushing the social justice warrior thing, and I'll tell you why. Because what had really happened was that during the Bush years and the wars in Iraq and the Patriot Act and all of these really fucked up and horrible things went down, and there was a really popular movement that was basically about basically the Constitution, talking about the Patriot Act, detention, torturing, and wiretapping, NSA, warrantless searches. So that's like Fourth Amendment stuff, Fifth Amendment stuff, First Amendment stuff. So it was a constitutional thing that I think also constitutionalists and conservatives were also against the neocons for this, and that's why you had a split, between sort of your real Tea Party type conservatives and your neocons, who were really on the same page with the neoliberals. And there was a big movement really against that. I mean, you had hundreds of thousands of people marching against these wars and against this Patriot Act, and Bush was hugely unpopular for that. And you also had this real issue of like police, shooting people without just cause, and just, crazy shit with police abuse. So those were kind of like the real issues you had. And then you had a lot of the 2007, the market crashed again. So it crashed once, like in 2000, 2001. They tried to blame it on the terrorists, but it was actually before the terrorists. And actually, just because the World Trade Centers went down doesn't really make sense, because everything's online. I mean, just because the buildings go down doesn't mean the economy is going to crash. It's a stupid idea. But they tried to kind of blame that. That was actually the dot-com bubble burst, and then they basically spent on the war, and then in 2007 you had the housing market crash, credit default swap, and the toxic derivatives, right? And that was kind of pushed onto Europe to create a European crisis. Now, to distract people from all of that, when Obama came to power on false promises and he lied to everybody, they also teamed up basically with certain online popular. They're not even left wing. I mean, it's really stupid. We're talking about like Slate and Jezebel, and they kind of pose as left wing. And the thing is that there's P.T. Barnum was a very famous circus ringleader and organizer, and he has a good expression called "There's a sucker born every minute," and and you just happen to be coming along at the right time. And at any given time, there's people who are 15 years old, 20 years old, 30 years old, whatever, and they're being politicized for the first time, and they have no idea about the history of any of these subjects. And so whoever gets their hands on them first basically gets to de-virginize them and basically gets to tell them the narrative that and control how they see the past, the present, and the future. So I wouldn't really call Jezebel and Slate like left-wing, but they try to definitely co-opt that. Center-left, but they don't really talk about issues about class really, and they're not revolutionary or subversive at all. They're actually the status quo. And so through these campaigns, so we're talking about the Obama administration, and then talking about trying to defuse the actual movements that were connected to the Constitution and to the wars, okay? And then to redirect people into the social justice warrior thing. So they got a bunch of people who were not even involved in anti-war politics and were not involved in constitutional stuff with, detention and torture and wiretapping. And they told them that the whole story all along had been all about privilege and checking your privilege. Like that had been they taught them in 2008 basically that everything in the history of mankind had been about gay people not able to fuck and women not able to get jobs that men have. That's what they taught. That's what they taught them. So, I mean, and we know that that's maybe a part of history in some way, and probably not even accurately so. Maybe for gays, but not for women. But yeah, there are some known psychological mechanisms that are being exploited. And the first one is that men inherently really actually do care about women. And so when women complain about something, men want to respond, right? And actually we're genetically wired that way. And that's how people have just been for like, whatever, a million years. So that in that sense, feminism is actually kind of manipulating something. It's like a thing where you repeat the thing twice. It's like saying that they're criticizing basically men's tendency to be protective of women. And basically what happened is society changed. I mean, air conditioning didn't really exist in buildings until after World War II. Yeah. And most work was until the early 1960s was outside. So women, and we're talking about the weather and elements and snows for 4 months out of the year in a lot of parts of the world and stuff like that. And men were trying to basically protect women, and women like wanted to be protected because, I mean, you don't really want to be. And yeah, if you were poor and you were both peasants, yes, women worked in the fields and they had the sickle and they were working alongside men. But the reason that men worked hard was to provide for their family and to provide, if men didn't have families, they would just be living in the jungle, in the forest, around the campfire and being with other men. And, but because they want women, they have to like work and create a surplus because women want to build a nest. So most of this is genetics, right? It's psychology. It's evolutionary psychology, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So that's being manipulated and it's being turned around against men. And they're using the same mechanisms against men again. And it's men who are doing this first and foremost. Like most women want no part of this. They just like, whatever, want to go to school, get a job, find a boyfriend, get married or not, or you know what I mean, pursue their careers. It's a very small minority of people connected to Jezebel and Slate who then are working with the Twitter sphere, and it's a Twitter phenomenon. They're not writing like long academic text. They can't argue this shit. It's just tweets. 160 characters is the length, so it's all these stupid rhetorical points, and it's really meant to turn people against each other, and it's a divide and conquer tactic.
Yes, yes, I agree. So, okay, so I hear on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, many people who identify themselves as MGTOWs, men going their own way, especially the one who probably is the voice of MGTOW, the YouTube channel named Sandman, and he in his videos says that the societies, the Western, it's all, the societies are all gynocentric. So, what is gynocentrism, and is it real or?
Yeah, it's real. I mean, societies are gynocentric. It's not. Look, the thing is that a lot of the MGTOWs are putting value judgments on things, and a lot of them are not. And I don't want to. The problem is that it's a label. So if you associate with yourself with a label like MGTOW, probably you just agree with a lot of other MGTOW people. But if you have a label, and if there are like people who are more prominent spokespeople, then people are going to associate you with those views. So I'm really sorry, but the thing is that to say that society is gynocentric is true. To think that you're going to change that is not true. That's
Yes,
okay.
yeah, well, I'm
So,
not really trying to change it, and I'm by no
well,
means,
yeah,
and
that's the difference between men's rights activists, MRAs, and MGTOWs. But
and
the
and
thing
I'm
is that,
not, and I'm by no means, I'm not identify myself as MGTOW,
yeah, right. I
because
know we don't.
MGTOWs just say that the marriage is slavery, and the women are just want to enslave men. I think I call bullshit on that.
Yeah, look, it's they're reacting to the propaganda of the SJWs, and the SJWs have polarized it. And if you're gonna get MGTOWs, then the SJW stuff is working, because the truth is that men and women have natural tensions, and they also love each other a lot, right? So, so I mean, the thing is that it's a shame that people are being pulled away. But I will say something in fairness, that that in fairness to the women on that point, and I'm not saying that they need more fairness, but I'm just going to be honest, is that it is more acceptable for a man not to get married than it is for a woman.
Not to get
And
married.
that's kind of strange, because there's about an even number of men and women. And if a woman is going to get married, then she's going to normally marry a man. 99.999% of the time it's going to be a man. And yet it's more socially acceptable already for men not to get married. So the MGTOW, I think that men have always gone their own way. I think that's actually the natural tendency of men. We know, like, the story of Mowgli in the Jungle Book, right? And I think that's actually a very prototypical male story. And men actually go their own way until they become mesmerized, by the beauty of a woman, and then they want to settle down, right? And that's, so, I mean, MGTOW, I kind of think it's probably, yeah, there's probably some lifelong hardcore MGTOW, but maybe also, I mean, maybe they just are not equipped. Maybe they would never make a woman happy anyway, for reasons because life is unfair and we're all born differently. And so they may be making the same mistake. And again, I hate to generalize. Some individuals may be making the same mistake as some feminists who, because they are personally unattractive or have a bad personality or don't get along well with people, they turn this into an ideology about gender. And that is, of course, their right to do that, but it's also probably not logical. It's probably also morally questionable when you start to condemn other people. So yeah, some people are fat, some people are skinny, some girls are born with no titties, and some guys are born with no dicks, and they may not have an easy time finding a mate, and then they want to make that into an ideology. The men's MRAs, men's rights people, again, also have a good case. Family law is disaster. You've got divorce is totally managed wrong. The idea that you can put a man in prison for falling behind on an alimony in a country that has, in reality, bro, 50% unemployment. If you take the number of people who are over a certain age, not in school, and you actually look at the total number of people, unemployment rate is 50% or 40%. So how can you put people in jail? And then also there's everything is getting, I'm not even saying it was fair in the first place, how much they were paying in child support or alimony, but the whole system about how judges determine what you owe, like you really can't petition to change that number, and you might lose your job and you still owe that money, and then you'll go to jail and you can't work when you're in jail. You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
that's a big problem. So the MRAs are right about all that stuff, you know. It's actually, kind of as a person who watches YouTube sometime and tries to understand what's going on, in truth, the people at A Voice for Men probably, at least Paul or whatever the main guy's name is, he's kind of old school. He's kind of like a masculine guy. But he can be a little bit cynical and stuff like that. But he seems actually the most reasonable. Gynocentricity is just what we said. It's basically, I don't know, some MGTOWs think it's like social, they think it's like cultural Marxism, and they probably couldn't tell you even like the name of a single book by Marx except for Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital, none of those which of course relate at all to what they would call cultural Marxism. Cultural Marxism is what they're referring with when I talked about Gramsci and then the development of the Frankfurt School. And I will also say that Gramsci was not involved in the Frankfurt School at all. He was from a prior generation and would have disagreed with almost everything that the Frankfurt School people said also. So the connection, between Marx and then Gramsci, so you got Marx was like in the, 1870s, 1860s, and then you've got, Gramsci was like in the 20s, and the Frankfurt School was like in the 50s and 60s. And then the cultural Marxism is actually just a wrongly used term. I mean, it's just a wrongly used term.
Yeah, I agree.
It really just, I think, most accurately refers to some of the semi-Marxists in the Frankfurt School who are talking about hegemony in Gramscian terms, and it really just doesn't have that much to do with SJW at all, or gynocentricity. So, but look, it's a fact. You can have a society, and all the men can die but one, and as long as you've got the women safe, you're going to have a next generation. So we're talking about the survival of the people, right? And thing is that even though we've had air conditioning for 50 years and we've had automobiles for 100 years, human beings have been like, I mean, if you follow this line of the science line or whatever, human beings have been evolving since competitive microorganisms, right? Since 3.5 or 4 billion years ago. And it's, it's eat or be eaten. And then you had the development of sexual reproduction. And so there's differences between the genders and they serve different roles. So, and that's just a biological fact. And I think the human brain has a lot of plasticity, and we can kind of trick ourselves, or we can work around things, or we can kind of rewire ourselves to a certain extent, and we can overcome some of those differences if we make a concerted effort or if we're socialized a certain way. So that's all, those are all accurate, relevant points. But thing is that when you get surprised by something and someone just comes at you, you're going to react from your instincts, and the instincts of men generally are to protect the women in their lives. So that's kind of just the normal thing. So the feminists who recognize that fact will say, aha, well, that's the root of patriarchy, and but then there's many contradictions in that. So it's gynocentricity is just that. I mean, it's a view. I mean, really, if you think about it, there men who want to dominate other men for the abstract goal of dominating other men actually has some homoerotic undertones. Okay, generally speaking, when men are compelled into violence, it's to defend their family, which are the children and the women. And that's, but abstract desire to dominate other men has a homosexual undertone. Yeah. Okay. So, but homosexuality has always been a part of human civilization. So there may have been some like ancient homosexual warrior kings, okay, who just wanted to conquer tribes to conquer them. But yeah, in terms of like providing for women and children and stuff like that, men want to protect women, and it's normal. And they may not always want to, and not all women want to be protected, and that's all good too. So the thing is that we happen to live in a society where people are free, generally, to make decisions and do what they want to do, and without exploring the fact that what people want to do is a product of biology, psychology, socialization. I mean, at any given time, you think that you are the one determining your desires, and so let's let that stand. And you're kind of free to do what you want. And the fact that people are going to tell you, well, I don't like that, well, fuck them. What the SJWs are kind of trying to say is that not only should people do whatever they want to do, but no one else should have an opinion about it. And that's a very thin-skinned and unrealistic approach to life. I mean, you're going to want to do something. Like, there's going to be someone criticizing our video right now. And we're not making this video. We're not going to not make it because someone's going to say, well, we said MGTOWs were this, or we got some point wrong. We just got to do it anyway. You can't have a thin skin about this shit. And what the social justice warriors are trying to basically do is be very aggressive and actually attack people. And you can actually be attacked by them and have a thick skin, and they'll dox you and try to get a hold of your employer, and lose your job and stuff like that. And they're actually being very aggressive, and actually they're the ones being violent. And they're being violent on the justification, on the pretext that other people are hurting their feelings. And that's what's actually kind of crazy.
Yes.
Yes, and fucked up about the whole thing.
Yeah, because the social justice warriors, they really can attack you, and they really can write to your employer and accusing you of being a Nazi, of being a sexist, or like they did to British scientist Dr. Phil Mason, who runs a YouTube channel.
Yeah, Dr. Phil Mason, right?
Yes. Thunderfoot. Yes, the social justice warriors wrote to his university, to his employers, to say that he was a Nazi, he's a sexist, and he praised Hitler, though he didn't do that.
That's right. They lied about what he's doing. I mean, Thunderfoot likes to troll the issue. Let's be fucking straight about that. I mean, but he gets views and he has fun and he likes to see himself on YouTube and shit like that.
Yeah, so, channel.
Yeah, he's got some good ones. I don't agree with like his. I think that he's a bit arrogant about some things. I'm just having my opinion. I mean, like he definitely he goes on about the points that are not. He doesn't really dig into questions that deep, and I don't know. He's kind of being like a feminist. Like, I'm being attacked. Like, fuck you, bro. Like, but get over it. But the fact that they tried to get him fired is a real thing, and that was fucked up. And I thought, but I've enjoyed his videos. I don't agree with like, I'm not myself an atheist, but I don't talk about that, and because it's not. I think it's a polarizing issue, and it kind of distracts from the point,
there is also, another YouTuber I like, anti-feminist. His name is Sargon of Akkad, and he also British, but he's historian probably, and his name is Sargon of Akkad, and he also make pretty good anti-social justice warriors, anti-feminist videos. Yeah. So and.
Yeah. So, you know what? I don't, to be honest, like, I think it's great that they're doing what they're doing and all that. I don't follow that because I just don't have the interest. Like, I mean, it's like, I know the subject very well, and there's really not any arguments I haven't heard and stuff like that. So, the person I thought that probably tackled the question the best, and happened to be a woman, was Karen Strawn, Girl Rights What. I thought actually that she actually went pretty meticulously through the history of some of the case law and the British common law about family law, and also she went pretty meticulously into the questions surrounding evolutionary biology, evolutionary psychology, and I think those are the best kind of facts or arguments, if you argue them, that can be made. I don't like really connect with her libertarian stuff, but I mean, she's not an economist, or she's not, but it's all good. I mean, everyone has different views on this stuff. What it is, Yuri, is the point that I would really make is that all of this stuff had been bubbling up, but it was not that. I'm talking about the social justice warrior stuff on Twitter and YouTube was completely designed at sort of frustrating the left. So people associate it with the left, and I guess if it's associated with the left, it is the left. But it was really, there was a different left before 2008 that also had many problems. And the SJW stuff, I am referring specifically to YouTube and Twitter. Okay, but the third wave feminism that informs this. So in Gramsci's theory, they did look at class oppression, and there is a such thing as class privilege. But in Marxist theory, the only thing that they actually talk about is, well, in Marxist theory, they talk about exploitation, which is a quantifiable figure based upon what's called the rate of profit, or the amount of profit of the surplus values extracted from the worker and stuff like that. So that's actually, one can argue that's not the case, but the Marxists will give you a number. Okay, they will give you like, oh, the worker is being exploited $2 an hour or something like that. So they will. So basically, you're working a job, and your boss is making a certain profit that is above his investment and above the risk and above what he's paying you, and that figure could be called the profit, and that's the rate of exploitation. So instead of, I'm being exploited and being oppressed, you have privilege. Well, these are separate concepts, and the Marxist one is probably more rigorous. One can argue that it's wrong, but at least it's a number that is quantifiable. Oppression is connected also to this, but legal oppression is basically collecting bribes, or like a sheriff in a county who writes tickets or tries to take property or put liens on people and stuff like that. That's called oppression. It's connected actually to corruption. But in the 19th century, not legal oppression, but a concept called national oppression came up. Well, you had the Austro-Hungarian Empire, you had the Russian Empire, you had the Holy Roman Empire, you had, or the German Empire at that time, you had Prussia, you had the British Empire, and in 1848 there was a revolutions in Europe, in Western Europe, and it was called the Spring. These were like national and social revolutions, and one of the issues was national oppression. So it's true that the Austrians had some control over the Hungarians, and the Hungarians say, yeah, we're being nationally oppressed. I mean, they had to kind of pay taxes to another country, which is like corruption, I guess. So that's national oppression. But in the United States, began to take on a new meaning, because you had like slavery and Native Americans and Mexicans and Chinese railroad workers and stuff like that. And oppression kind of got confused with the idea of exploitation. But oppression, like racial oppression, was not really about extracting bribes, but it's connected to the idea of national oppression. But the blacks in America would have to kind of constitute a nation, one could call like the black nation, or that because of their race, they're being racially oppressed. And there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, you can't deny, and some things are exaggerated and some things are not stated enough. I mean, I don't want to get into that, but I think it's hard to deny that there was slavery, and it was because they were black Africans, and there was also Irish sharecroppers, and there was not white slavery in terms of sex trade, but there were white Europeans who were held in slavery. You had indentured servitude, and you had actually many ways, and that actually, these problems about looking at things through this lens does relate very much today to the social justice warrior issue, because the truth is that in America, you have a lot of really, really poor white people, and the majority of poor people in America are white. And yeah, per capita, poverty affects people of color more. And there are definitely issues of privilege, classism, racism, and historical issues that are unresolved that are connected to that. So that's a true argument. I can see that, and it would be stupid to deny that also. But what happened is that the rich, educated white people from universities made a decision that the new form of social control was not going to be from the traditionally WASP Christian perspective that said, well, we are the white Christian colonizers and we bring civilization to you. They wanted to maintain that element, but they wanted to use the new language of resistance that emerged in the 20th century, the anti-colonial movements against national racial oppression, movements against classism and stuff like that. I mean, in a reality, man, you used to have people working 16 hours a day in Europe and in the United States, and you had children like 4 and 5 years old, like working in steel mills, like missing fingers, and coal miners, and people died when they were like 20 years old of black lung. I mean, this was like real stuff, and there was these, and it wasn't like they were doing it because they wanted to, like there was not choices. It was effectively slavery. You know, you had these enclosure acts, and every piece of land was owned, and you couldn't even like, you didn't even have a piece, you didn't have not have a pot to piss in. You could just like move away somewhere and grow your own food. You'd be squatting, and they would legally send the dogs out for you and hunt and kill you, right, for trying to grow one potato somewhere in the forest. This is how it really happened in America, and this happened to white people. So what happened is that people in the United States who get to go to college are very privileged, and who get to go to like a real university, not like a trade school or a community college, but like a decent university. It's pretty privileged. Now they might end up with a lot of debt, and it doesn't guarantee they're going to get a good job. But this is also mostly white people. Let's be straight about that. And they kind of want to feel. It's kind of like they want to take a pull yourselves up by the bootstrap attitude towards other white people, or they want to not associate themselves socially and culturally with poor white people because they're fucking classists. But they want to help people of color, okay? But they want to do it because they see themselves as above them. So to give someone a helping hand up, you have to be, I mean, just think about it physically. You got to be above them to help them up.
They're condescending.
And they're condescending. And but the idea of white poverty totally disrupts this whole scenario of condescension that they want to basically put. So again, you've got a lot of really emasculated men.
Some people call them emasculated men, manginas.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. I thought mangina was a great term. What was it from Deuce Bigelow, Male Gigolo? But or was it his he pussy? But anyway, yeah. So yeah, the mangina. But you know, yeah, these guys are really emasculated, and they associate emasculation with education. So you know, they don't lift weights. They wear glasses even though they have perfectly good vision, or they associate wearing glasses with being well-read or being smart, even though it's just indicative of poor genetics or a bad diet. And you know, they think that this is they're trying to project class, and actually they're the most fucking classist, racist people you'll meet, right? Are these social justice warriors. And that's the real problem. And the thing is that in psychology, it's actually called projection. So they kind of know, they're kind of trying to work out their own internal demons of being these very racist and classist, condescending assholes. And so they're accusing other people of it who probably really aren't.
Yeah.
And they're accusing a lot of people who are really actually more real.
Yeah.
and rooted in grassroots than they are.
Yeah. So Joaquin, if we talk about the black people and the universities, so this question for me is inevitable. So what actually happened last year in the Missouri University? Why did the principal resign?
I have no idea, man. I didn't even.
You didn't
I
follow
tell
the
you, the
story.
micro dramas of this shit. If you tell me the story, I'll tell you what probably happened. But I swear to God, that shit's so
Look,
fucking boring.
there were protests in the Missouri University, and the students of color protested. So their principal should resign because he refuses to acknowledge his white male privilege, and the principal did resign just because some students protested and the principal resigned. There wasn't really a good media coverage because those social justice warriors, they tried to kick out the journalist who
Oh yeah, yeah. You know what? Like, so I used to be a union rep for public employees, and some of them were school employees. Actually, they were all school employees in my district. And I was actually deeply involved in these college board of trustees type politics. And so every one of these colleges basically has what's called a board of trustees or a board of governors. And they're elected normally, unless it's a private institution, if it's a public school. Was this a public school?
what yeah.
Was this a public school? Okay, so you basically got the board of trustees and they're elected, right? And the president of the college is appointed by the board of trustees, okay? Now, what probably happened is that there was like other non-related stuff going on and the board of trustees was getting ready to move against them. And so there's always a lot of collaboration between the students and professors and the unions and the board of trustees, or not the unions, but other organizations. And so probably this had nothing to do with white privilege. There's probably some scandal or some politics that involve electricity or the grass that growing or like contractors and building and maintenance and had done, or the budget, and they were going to get rid of this guy and they didn't have a good reason to, and it was not going to be like popular, so they made it popular and they just use a side issue. That's really honestly my best guess, without having any facts, because that's actually how politics works.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so well, I see with all of these social justice warriors, with all these feminists. So I think there is actually a war on the males, on masculinity in the West, because all of these phrases, the feminists come up with the phrases toxic masculinity, and they drink tea from the male tears mugs, and they talk about male privilege and rape culture. This all leads me to thinking that these people have a disdain for men. They hate men, and
no, they hate weak men. They hate weak men. Let me tell you,
but the toxic
women have always hated weak men.
but the toxic
Let me tell you
masculinity,
something.
they
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
declare
Look, the words are new. The words,
they actually
sorry, the
declare
words are new.
men, male traits like being assertive, being tough, being brave, being strong as toxic and harmful. Why the fuck is this?
That's always been the case, bro. That's always been the case. They have some new words that are like buzzwords,
Yeah.
but the dynamics are as old as dirt, man. Let me tell you. Um, Basically, if you're a man and you're trying to be whatever, masculine, and a woman challenges that, and that's her job, right? How's she going to have healthy babies? Like, because there's a lot of guys pretending to be tough who aren't, right? Because that's going to increase their chances, but in fact they're cowards. So if the actual men back off from those challenges, then they didn't pass the shit test. So, but women should give those shit tests because there's a lot of posers out there.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So you just have to like kind of, nothing is new. This shit is old as dirt. So look, it's classist, first of all, because it's always been like the ruling class and the upper middle class, okay, in their societies And in Western Anglo societies, think about like Hugh Grant, right? These sort of effete or effeminate males. That is a sign of class, right? Because you don't have to work. Okay, now, of course, they can be involved in extreme violence, but they use hypoagency. The ruling class, these effete males, you know, or like in the old days, like powdered wigs, you know, we're gentlemen, you know, but then they call the guards or they call the gendarmerie and they come and arrest the rabble. The rabble have to fend for themselves. They walk the streets. They fight the unemployed, you know, they become pirates and adventurers and shit. I mean, so there's always been a discourse since the beginning of time, the ruling class telling their daughters or the mothers telling their daughters or the women telling their friends like, oh, stay away from those rabble. They're uncouth. So that's toxic masculinity is a classist concept of the men and women of the upper middle and ruling class will say that the men of the bottom class are, you know, rabble. So what? You know,
Yeah.
soldier on is what you got to do. So, if you could avoid all this, and I know that's like a kind of anarchist, a truly anarchist way of looking at it. But if it's going to end up losing your job or in law, I think the MGTOW thing is actually very interesting, but it's actually going to start resulting even further in people just dropping out of society altogether because it's like, you know, why would you, if you have a choice to opt out, I think a lot of young men are deciding they don't need women in their lives, it's not worth it. And if they, in Western societies, view that women are kind of borderline prostitutes, then if they want to fuck, then they can save a couple $100 and do that, or they can have friends with privileges if they're charismatic enough and have no strings attached. But in a sense, there's kind of a eugenics program. Life has always been a eugenics program, and some of the problem of, again, I'm generalizing, men's rights, MGTOW, and all of these men talking about the problems of feminism is that they are also, not all of them, but some of them are kind of themselves rooted in this idea that otherwise things would be fair or that things are supposed to be fair. And that's a fundamental flaw. Okay, we're all going to fucking die. Maybe that's not fair, right? And some of us are born rich and become poor, and that's not fair. Some of us are born poor, and that's not fair. And then we get rich. Maybe that's not fair. Maybe we did it. You know what I mean? Maybe we stole the money. Maybe we made it legitimately. I mean, there's just, life is so complex. There's so many different angles. You know, everyone's biography is different.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, it's a situation, to be honest, right?
Okay, we've had some small technical problems, but anyway, let's continue. So, you know, this year there is going to be a presidential election in the United States. So, which candidate is, you know, the social justice warriors will vote for? I think it's Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, but certainly not Donald Trump.
Yeah, certainly not Donald Trump. It's SJ SJWs are like split into a few different camps. Um, some some of them don't like Hillary Clinton, actually for the same reasons that I don't like Hillary Clinton. Um, I mean, she is pro-war, you know, friend of the bankers. I mean, she is, right, and she's a, you know, so there will be a lot of SJWs against Clinton, but yeah, between the two SJWs who do vote for one of the two, I would say none of them will vote for Trump, you know.
And
But
what about Bernie Sanders?
no, I don't really think. I think that Bernie Sanders is not an SJW candidate. I'm not a supporter of Bernie Sanders. I don't think that politics is what it looks like in America. I have a whole different analysis of how to approach that. It's a game, of course, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't vote. But you know, I voted for Ron Paul in 2012. But it was, you know, I didn't think he was going to win because he didn't even, you know, make the primaries. But I wrote the name in. But it's not because I'm a libertarian. I just actually agree with the question of the federal government federalization. I do think that the states should have more, you know, more power on certain issues that have come up in Supreme Court rulings in the last 50, 60 years, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, dude, I guess Clinton is the SJW candidate, I guess you would say, but I mean, that's not the reason why not to vote for Clinton. I mean, there's you know, people who are stuck on this subject and stuff are kind of missing. I mean, I'm not, the criticisms that people have of SJWs are a lot of my own criticisms, but it's like by far not the most important question going on in the world right now.
So another question, and I think we're done because we have already made another hour and a half video. So
Oh shit, what do we
yeah,
do?
okay. So I'm going to ask you about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
This candidate, I see his popularity is growing. He's very, very popular. So
Yeah.
what can you say? Does he have a chance of winning? I ask you this as a Russian because he said a lot of good things about Russia, about Putin, and I'm just going to make sure, was it lip service or was he really
Oh,
pro-Russia?
everything he says is bullshit.
It's
Everything he
lip
says is
service.
lip service. Dude, everything he says is bullshit. But it's not any more or less bullshit than anything else. He's actually like a jester, like a court jester. He's actually making a mockery of the whole thing, which I think is brilliant. And for that reason, I wish him well. And because of the details or the mechanics of American political life and the issues of class and politics, actually he's the best president for, he may not even want to be president. I mean, there's a lot of indications, and I think they're probably accurate, that he's a Hillary Clinton plant, okay? Because he is the only person, I wrote about this, okay? He is the only person that Clinton actually thinks, I'm not saying that she can beat him, but he's the only person that she thinks that she can beat, because she knows she is a person, she's a fundamentally rotten person.
Yeah.
Um, she's a fundamentally bad human being. Trump, you know, is full of shit, and he inherited all of his money, and things to be said about both of them. And it's not about their personalities. It's not about who inherited money, who stole money. I mean, everyone's a fucking crook in the world. That's not the point. The point is this. It's not about what you say, and it's not about what you want, and it's not about who you are. It's what you're able to do. And Clinton, if she is president, will be effective in silencing the left, just like Obama did. And that is why the occupations and wars in Iraq and Afghanistan went unchallenged within the United States, because the Democrat Party is in the position to tie organized labor and silence the anti-war movement through the SJW movement. But if a Republican is president, then it stokes or it inflames class tensions in America. The president is then seen as being anti-popular and pro-war. Obama is just as pro-war as Bush, but there was not one single anti-war march of any significant scale during Obama's presidency. Therefore, if Americans want to avoid a war with Iran or with Russia, they should vote for Trump, or really any Republican. They should, if they're worried about things like Medicare, Social Security, public education, these things, in a way I want to say fuck them and fuck themselves, because a nuclear war is much worse than that. And they need to sacrifice a little bit. They need to realize that a Republican president is not able to mobilize the American people. See, something I don't know if you know, but every single president, every single major war that was either major, like a world war, or had the potential to become a world war, required a Democrat president, because it ties organized labor. It ties really, this may be unpopular for suburban and rural Republicans or libertarians who are anti-system to understand, but the most critical points, not in food production, but in industry and in city life, are in the city. And in order to control urban populations and industrial working populations, I'm not talking about the unemployed, I'm talking about factory workers, and you have to control the Democrat Party connected to the presidency. So in World War I, Democrat president. World War II, Democrat president. Vietnam, Democrat president. Yugoslavia, Democrat president. Okay, every major war is a Democrat president. So for that reason, vote Trump or Cruz or whoever the Republican candidate is, need to do that.
Yeah, okay. Joaquin, so, there are people who say that Democrats and Republicans are actually the same party, but it's just subject for another video.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, do the Republican candidate do any Republican, I'm not talking about Trump or other, does any Republican candidate have a chance to win this election over Democrat candidates?
If the candidate is Clinton, all of them have a chance to win. The goal was, Trump, it may be a wild card here, but there's a lot of evidence that Trump is a friend of the Clintons, okay, just so you know, and he is a big Clinton supporter, and he's actually been a lifelong Democrat. So what happened, dude, was that there are these like study groups that are done, okay, and they take like hundreds of people and they pay them like whatever, $50 for the day, and they put them in a room and they talk about Clinton. They show them pictures, they show them advertisements, they talk about Clinton, and they get people's reactions, okay? And Clinton is in this very difficult situation of feeling that she's entitled to be the next president of the United States, but in fact being the least popular American political figure possibly in U.S. history after Nixon, or parallel with Nixon.
Yeah, and Trump also called Clinton Trump called Clinton the worst state secretary in the history of the USA.
Yeah, which I don't know if that's a compliment or, I don't know, because, what he's talking about is like how she fucked up the Benghazi affair in Libya. But, I mean, what does that mean? They were supposed to fuck Libya up the correct way? I mean, so, I don't want to get into, if she fucked things up, good, But, but if she's inept, it's because she's inept. But she's extremely arrogant and hypocritical, and she's a liar, and she's a murderer and a war criminal. Like, I mean, there are so many fucking dead bodies behind her just from Arkansas. Her and her husband were involved in so many murders.
A sadistic, psychopathic bitch, because
she's also left. A sadistic psychopath.
She left when Gaddafi. She said, "We came, we saw him," and she left. Just that made me cringe inside.
Yeah, I know. People like the image of Nelson Mandela, but actually in power he was only marginally effective, and he only got into power by making a compromise with the British and the Americans and Israelis and shit like that. And the whole anti-apartheid thing was a lie in the end. The true leader of Africa was Muammar Gaddafi. He was the true, and and Libya was the best society to live in for any African, not in my opinion, but according to all of the UN Human
Yes,
Development Indexes and every economic and social matrix or index, any kind of objective analysis you can make. And people had all kinds of freedom. They could go to school. They went to school in Europe. They were paid for. People got $50,000 for getting married, free apartment. Gas was 5 cents a gallon. I mean, this shit just goes on and on and on and on. They were building a gold-backed currency. They had underground form the fucking Sahara Desert. I mean, the shit goes on and on. I mean, it was incredible, and he was hated by like almost all the Arab leaders and all the
absolutely,
pro-U.S. You
absolutely.
know,
He was headed
yeah,
by the Gulf monarchies. They
yeah,
hated him more than anything.
more than anything, um, he basically was like his own position of power, and you know what? He lived very humbly. And we're getting on another subject, but the point is that Clinton is a murderer and laughed at his execution that she
Yes,
ordered. And well, really, it was Obama who authorized it. But Obama is such a coward that he conducts foreign policy through McCain and pretends that these are Republicans doing things when it's Obama's administration. I mean, so there's no such thing as an American president who can allow the opposition party to conduct foreign policy unless he's saying go do this, right? It's just not how it works, right?
yeah,
So like let's live in reality here. But so yeah, it's really this is all Obama. In fairness to Clinton, and whether it was Clinton or Kerry or McCain, they're all doing what the Washington Consensus, the neoliberal, neoconservative agenda is. You've got basically DC and Wall Street. So it is what it is, man. She's a fucking crazy killer.
yeah.
Trump is just an asshole, and people are kind of find it refreshing the way that he's an asshole. I've described him as a comb over, penis forward kind of guy. But it is what it is. I mean, the thing with the guy is that what is so scary to people, these SJWs, is because they are hypocrites. And the only thing that he's a hypocrite about is that he talks about being smart business and making money, but he actually inherited all his money. So
Yeah,
that's actually the big problem with Trump. But in terms of hypocrisy, but he is a self-actualized asshole. And SJWs are all assholes that are projecting onto other people. Trump does not project, right? So he just embodies the ass. He's in touch with his assholeness. And I think that is refreshing, a refreshing honesty. And he's also a mockery of the system. I mean, he's basically like a reality show character, and
yeah,
that he's doing politics. It's kind of like Idiocracy, that movie Idiocracy. I mean, but the thing is that Americans will have all of the politicians that they deserve. There's a reason I left that country, and I have tremendous sympathy for innocent people there.
I
But being
also
innocent
have
doesn't mean that
sympathy
you're a very
for.
good person either. Okay.
I also have sympathy for innocent people, for everyday Americans. Many people say that I wish destruction of America. In reality, I don't. I
You mean the state. Yeah, you mean the institutions. I know what you mean.
Yeah, but and Trump also said that, because I hear what Trump says, and many people think he's very racist against Mexicans, against Latinos. He's racist against Muslims because he said ban Muslims entering the United States. Yeah,
He's just trying to, yeah, no, what he's doing is called mobilizing the base. So at the root of the rural Republican Party, you've got a lot of people who are angry about the way immigration has been done in the U.S. and for good reason, and others for bad reason. Okay, there's a lot of Islamophobia, some for good reason and some for bad reason. I mean, there's a lot of Zionist groups working in the American Baptist or Protestant churches that are Islamophobic and pro-Israel for not good reasons, and there's other people who are concerned about ISIS and the Saudi kind of influence radical Islamism, and that's for good reason, right? I mean, so but it can all be easily misdirected, of course. But he's mobilizing the base. Is he racist? No, dude. The guy just is a narcissist and wants to be famous and likes to see himself on TV. And there's many billionaires who have more billions than he does, and they just don't have an interest in public life. They're happy to just make money and be incredibly rich people, but he likes to see himself out there on TV and do the whole thing. And that's, I mean, why are you doing YouTube? I mean, you're saying stuff, but other people say similar things. So yeah, we're people who like to get out there. Can't knock him for it.
Yeah.
But you know what? He's doing his thing. The reason that he's supportable is not for anything that he says or anything that he does, but for his inability to make social peace in the U.S. I'm not in favor of social peace in the U.S. I think that if America has social peace in it with its present ruling class, then they will make a war against Russia. So
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. The immigration is a subject for a separate video, but I think we should stop right here. That is all for today. Thank you so much for
oh man,
spending
thank you for
time.
having me, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's cool.
Yeah.
Sorry with technical difficulties and shit, but I gotta
Yeah.
reinstall my
It's
drivers.
okay. It's okay. So I think that's all. Thank you very much again. So bye. See you again
All
later.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye. Bye,
All
dude.
right.
Bye.